Hello there folks, welcome back to the Chaps Guide. My name is Ash and I'm your host on this journey through men's style, self-development and personal grooming. And today I thought I'd throw an extra video in which was focused around you. Because as I say, we're all pilgrims together on this journey to Chap Nirvana, and it's my pleasure where I can to throw in some support for you. So when people ask me questions, I'm more than happy to try and answer them. And as ever, I'm an unqualified expert here, so I'm giving you my observations and views. But a number of people have written to me. Now I put the opportunity for people to ask me questions up on my Instagram page. So I put a picture up and said, ask me any questions, and these are the questions which came in. So let us begin. The first question is from Mark Walsh, who says, "Hi Ash, I've purchased a couple of Harris tweeds and now wish to pair them with a tie and pocket square. What are the rules for the type of material and pattern, etc.?" So I think basically what Mark is asking here is if you've got a tweed jacket, it's got a distinctive pattern generally. If you want to pair them with a pocket square and a tie, what sort of rules should you adhere to? Well, my general sort of approach to it myself would be stay clear of other tweeds, plaids, tartans and things like that, because when you start mixing things up which are very similar, you're going to get a bit of overwhelm in the way that you dress. When I wear a tweed jacket, I will typically wear a non-patterned shirt and with it. So either white, let's be honest, you can't go wrong with white. White will suit you for pretty much any situation. But if you want to go pink, if you want to go light blue, or even a darker shade of blue, depending on the situation. All right, remember, the whites and the light blues, they're pretty formal. You can wear them casually and formally. When you start going into darker, more contrasting colours of shirt, then you're stepping away from formality, and you've got to be careful in the way that the colours will marry. So if you're wearing a tweed jacket, I would go for a white or light blue shirt, maybe pink as I say, and go for a tie which has a solid colour. When you start trying to throw other tweeds in there, or plaids, checks, other sort of ties like that, you run the risk of just having too much going on. So for me, unless the tweed that you're wearing is quite simple and plain, then I would go for a solid colour tie. And simple as that, depending on the colours that you're wearing. So marry them up accordingly. But just avoid putting too much pattern and texture into an outfit. Your tweed jacket provides pattern, it provides texture. Don't overwhelm the people that you meet by displaying too much to them. That's all I would suggest. Be conservative, don't be eccentric. Next question comes from Shoes That Last, good name. Is there any reason for turnips on formal trousers or jeans? Or is it just fashionable these days? Well, I didn't know the answer to this, so I have to be honest, I did a little bit of research. Because I often wear turnips on my own trousers. They're not so fashionable as they used to be, that is fair to say. When it comes to men's formal trousers, you generally will find trousers without a turnip as a matter of course, but you do get the odd turnips. And when it comes to turnips, they can be directly attributed, and this is the interesting fact, to King Edward VII. So we're going way back into the 1800s now, I believe it would have been, or early 1900s. And in that era, the roads, the pavements, were not as they are today. We live in a world today where we don't have to walk through rubbish, detritus, dirt, filth, horse manure, as would have been the case in the 18th century, because the roads weren't clean and pristine as most pavements are, sidewalks are, in the modern world. It was a dirty world back then, and horses used to crap in the road, it used to be on the pavements. So a gentleman out and about doing his daily activities, he'd be negotiating the filth of a dirty pavement. And particularly when it rained, there'd be lots of mud, there'd be puddles. So it wouldn't be uncommon if a gentleman was walking down a particularly filthy area, he would roll his trousers up to prevent splashing onto his trousers. And King Edward VII, being, a sartorially elegant and wealthy man, said to his tailor one day, "Look, I'm fed up of having to roll my trousers up when I walk down a dirty street. Is there anything we can do to make it, a little bit more permanent. So his tailor actually fitted a turnip to the trouser so that the bottom hem of the trouser wasn't going to get dirty, muddy. It was turned up one step, hence the turnip was created. And yeah, that's how it started. It was King Edward VII. At the time, I believe he inspired the turnip on trousers. He was the Prince of Wales before he became king, but that's where it originates to. So in the modern era, it is a matter of personal preference. Some people like them, some people don't. The advantage, I think, to a turnip is that little bit of extra material turned up at the bottom of your trouser. It adds a bit of weight to the length of your trouser, the leg, and that little bit of extra weight at the bottom might help the trouser to drape a little bit better, you know, hang a little more true. But ultimately, it's all in the aesthetics. If you like the look, might be the look for you. Next question from Ronnie Hatt. Braces versus belts. I have recently tried braces again, the clip-on versions for ease of use, and I find them more comfortable, being larger around the middle than I would like. Okay, so braces. I believe in America you would refer to these as suspenders. I think it is fair to say that, I'll use the British term, braces are probably at an all-time low in respect to their popularity, because, and I think the primary reason for that is that most gentlemen these days tend to remove their jackets when they're in the workplace, when they're at home, when they're out at events, whatever it may be. And obviously the braces, the suspenders which hold your trousers up, they're primarily intended to be inconspicuous, all right? You're not meant to know that you're wearing them. So if you take your jacket off in work, for instance, it's going to be rather obvious that you're wearing braces. And I think for that reason, more than anything else, they have tended to fallen out of style in the modern era. Now, there's no disputing at all that they are exceptionally effective at their task, all right? So they hold your trousers up. They don't, the disadvantage with a belt, for instance, is that you have to cinch it up around the waist, and in so doing it affects the way that the trousers lay against the body and the drape as they flow down your legs. Whereas the braces, the trouser hangs on its own weight, it's not being sort of cinched around the waist. It's more of a natural drape to your trousers if you use braces. So if you are absolutely somebody who prefers you know, the traditional way, and I dare say I have worn braces occasionally, they are very comfortable, so there is that advantage to it too. I know larger gentlemen often say they prefer braces because, again, it's more comfortable. So it's personal preference, but my feeling is that the braces have fallen out of general use today because people tend to take their jackets off more when they're in company, when they're in the workplace, and hence the braces would be obvious, visible to everybody, and that's not the image that most people would choose to present. So hence they've fallen out of use. But no, I mean, you know, go for it. If it's comfortable, if it works for you, don't feel conscious. And particularly if you're wearing it with a suit and you keep your jacket on, people are not even going to know you're wearing braces. Next question. Araya Claims. Good name. What are the best type of bespoke shoes for us guys with flat feet? Well, the answer is really in what you've suggested, bespoke shoes. Because all bespoke shoes should be perfect for you, whatever size foot you have, because bespoke, by very definition, means that it's made for you and specifically for you alone. So a bespoke shoemaker will typically make a last or a wooden model of your foot, and then he will make the shoe around that model, the last. So whatever size your foot, you should be able to get a bespoke shoe, which fits you perfectly. Now, if you're talking about non-bespoke, so, you know, shall we use the term off-the-rack shoes, then it's going to be a little bit different, because each shoe manufacturer will have a different interpretation of size. You know, I've worn some, I take a size UK 8. Some UK 8s are snug, some are quite spacious. It depends on the last which has been used by the manufacturer. If you're buying your shoe brand new and the manufacturer, you know, you're buying it, say, off their website or whatever, get in touch with them and ask them, is the last used in this shoe generous or is it true to size? Because some manufacturers, particularly if they're making a shoe which is, shall we say, a country shoe, maybe a brogue or a boot, which they would anticipate gentlemen would wear in outdoor pursuits, they will tend to make those far more generous in their fit, because they would make the assumption you're going to wear a thicker sock with them if you're using them in outdoor activity. So it's worth asking. If nothing else, I have found with most of the British shoe manufacturers that they will be more than happy to tell you this last is a country last, so it's a little more generous. So you can vector in much more comfort when it comes to the size. And of course, many of the brands these days will have multiple width fittings. So make sure you know your width fitting, make sure your foot has been measured correctly, and make sure that you're buying the shoe which corresponds to your size. But if we're talking bespoke, and unfortunately that's the expensive end of the market, I mean entry-level bespoke is going to be about £2,500 for a decent dress shoe in this day and age. You know, you're going to get exactly what you want. So good luck with that journey, but keep me posted. Next question is from Kia Hardy 0, who says, which tie knot for different occasions? That's a really good question. I'm researching a video coming up shortly on the journey of the tie in modern life these days, and often I think the tie knot is overlooked as such an integral part of the tie wearing experience, because most men, they tend to learn one tie knot when they're young, and that's the tie knot they will carry through with them for the rest of their lives. Although I'm sure many of you will be aware, there is a whole handbook full of different tie knots that you can choose. Some are very exotic and bizarre. Some are very simple. I would suggest that at the very least, a gentleman would need to know 3 tie knots. You can probably get away with 2, but I would say 3 would be the way to go. Now, the tie knot which most people tend to wear is the 4-in-hand. This is the simplest tie knot. It's easier than tying your shoelaces. It's the one that most people learn. Maybe if you wear a school blazer and you wear a tie with that, that's the one you're going to learn because it's the easiest. Now, the 4-in-hand provides you with an asymmetrical, so non-symmetrical tie knot, which is a little bit, avant-garde, shall we say. A little bit of sprezzatura involved with the 4-in-hand because they can be very tight, they can be drawn very loose. It depends on your personal taste. But the important thing to remember with the 4-in-hand, it tends to make quite a small knot. It tends to be asymmetrical, so it's not very symmetrical. As a consequence, I think the 4-in-hand suits more casual situations, or if you're wearing a woven or knitted tie, because it's a very simple knot, it doesn't take a lot into the tie knot itself. So if you've got a tie which is quite bulky, quite textured, the 4-in-hand, I mean, when I wear a knitted tie, I always wear a 4-in-hand. However, in situations like this where I'm wearing a silk tie, this is a Dunhill tie, which is a handmade silk tie, it's quite fine. The material is quite fine within itself. If I wore it in 4-in-hand style, it would be a tiny little knot. So I'm wearing a half Windsor. Now, the beauty of the half Windsor, it's not much more complicated than the 4-in-hand. However, it provides a symmetrical a triangular tie knot, which is very conservative and very, heritage based. I think it suits more formal things. So if you like, if you're wearing a business suit, for instance, I would go for a half Windsor. And it can, again, be used to make quite a small tie knot if the material of your tie is quite fine. So if you like it really nice and small, you can get it right down in size as well. But if you've got a normal spread on the collar, the half Windsor, I think, just gives you that nice classical edge. Now, the third tie knot, which I'm going to suggest, is not necessarily one you would always need, but it's the full Windsor. It's the half Windsor with just an extra loop of material, and it provides a larger tie knot. So if you've got a very fine tie, which you want to get a bit of body into the tie knot, again, provides a triangular knot, which is symmetrical. Perfect if you want to look very smart and you've got a fine tie, or if you're wearing a very broad spread on the collar, so lots of space at the throat, at the collar, you want a tie which is going to fill that gap. The Windsor will give you more body because more of the tie is used in the tie knot. So think of those 3. All of them are very easy to learn. I might actually do a video on each of those tie knots if I haven't already in the library of videos we have. But at the very minimum, a 4-in-hand for casual and for, sort of sprezzatura style ties and knitted ties. and the half Windsor for business and a bit more conservative situations, or if you've got quite fine material in the tie. I hope that helps for you. Now, the next question is Timekeeper JG. Okay, good question. Which is better, Cheney or Edward Green? A really good question, because only very recently I visited both Edward Green and Joseph Cheney's factories up in Northamptonshire, and I've become quite an aficionado of those shoe manufacturers. I'm a particular fan of Joseph Cheney because I own several of their shoes. I've yet to own a pair of Edward Greens, but I'm definitely on a journey to reducing a pair of those into my collection very soon, once I can get them cheap enough. So, to answer your question, undoubtedly I'm going to have to say, when it comes down to quality here, I think Edward Green is going to win over Joseph Cheney. For the obvious reason, it's a much more expensive shoe. All right, the typical shoe from Edward Green is going to be £1,000 British. The average shoe, I'm going to say, from Joe Cheney or Cheney's is going to be somewhere around 500. Yes, they've got much more expensive shoes if you go for their boots with shearling linings and things like that. But typically, you can get them from about 300 to 500. Edward Green's round about 1,000 starting point. And I've been to the factory, I've spoken to the people who work in the factory making the shoes in both of those locations, and in Edward Green's, the difference is there's much more human interaction involved. You've got human beings cutting the leather themselves. I'm not sure about Joseph Cheney's, but more likely they've got, large cutting machines which chomp out the leather into the shape, and then they get closed and prepared into the shoe. In Edward Green's, there's a man who cuts them out, the clicker. I met one the other day, it was in a recent video I did, but you've got a chap who cuts it out by hand. The human eye is involved in cutting out the template. When it comes to the creation of some of their more iconic shoes, when it comes to Edward Green's, they make a split-toe derby as one of their more, signature shoes. That split toe is hand sewn. Because of the shape and the form that it takes, it's not really going to be easy or feasible to run it through a sewing machine. Even though there's a human operating the sewing machine, it's still got to be done, by a human. But in Edward Green's, all done by hand sewn. So you're getting that elite level of finish. So Edward Green wins in that question there without doubt. That's not to say Joseph Cheney are not fantastic. The reason I buy their shoes is, well, obvious. They have a fantastic quality of shoe at what I believe to be a very approachable price. So Joseph Cheney, a great place to start in your journey to great shoes. Edward Green, maybe a little bit further down the path when it comes to quality, but absolutely, either of them would make a great place to buy your shoes. Next question. Thank you for this, Ash. This comes from Bargain Collector. Under what circumstances does wearing lapel pins or badges outside the cut-through hole leave any punched holes on the garment? Does it damage the fabric? So what Bargain Collector is asking there is, most of jackets that we will wear have a lapel buttonhole here. It's designed to put, boutonnieres through and things like that. And he's asking, when you start pushing, tie pins through the lapel, is it going to cause damage? Should you do it at all? And the answer is, it depends on the material in the garment that you're wearing. Now, if you're wearing tweed, if you were to put your little lapel pin in, which has got the little spike on the back with the butterfly clasp at the rear, it's not actually damaging the material. It's finding its way between the threads. It's not causing any long-term damage. Same goes for most suits. If they've got typical wool or something like that, you're not punching a hole through the material. You're carefully threading that pin through the garment. You're not damaging anything. Now, I'm wearing a cotton travel jacket today. Now it's obviously very closely woven, the cotton. If I was to push a lapel badge through this, it's going to damage the threads. It's going to break the threads in its journey through to the other side. Hence, I would not wear a lapel pin on a jacket which is made of very densely knitted or woven material like cotton here, because it's going to cause damage. Very different if it's wool, if it's cashmere, if it's tweed, whatever other material you've got. I would limit jackets like I'm wearing here to having any lapel badge through the buttonhole on the lapel rather than on the lapel itself. So just be careful, don't be forcing anything, just make those little pins go through between the threads, don't force them in and break the threads, otherwise you are going to get damage to the material. But either way, you should only be wearing one lapel badge at a time, so occupy it through your lapel buttonhole, you're going to be absolutely fine. Okay, last question, and it's related to the previous one. This is from Roger R, and he says, how many lapel badges, pins, are too many? King Charles, in a recent image, had 3 on his lapel. And you're absolutely right. King Charles often does have more than one lapel badge on his jacket. But there's a reason for that when it comes to the king, because when he goes out on his public duties, so I don't know, opening a school, kissing babies, unveiling a new bridge or something like that, he knows well in advance who's going to be present. If he's visiting maybe that hospital trust, or he's going to visit an army regiment, he very carefully wears the items, badges or icons, which are relative to the events he's going to. So if he's going to a charity, maybe he's a patron of a charity, he will wear the charity badge relating to that. He may be going to 2 charities that day, so to save the effort of changing his badges as he goes through the day, he will pop 3 on his lapel. Now the king is known to be quite a stylish chap. He often wears a boutonniere and several badges. So he can get away with it because he's cultivated that style over the years, and also there's a reason why he's doing it. For us mere mortals though, who are not doing that sort of thing on a daily basis, I would suggest 1 lapel badge is the maximum you adorn your clothing with on any daily basis, because when you start adding 2 or 3, it's overkill. You know, when you meet somebody for the first time, your eyes might wander to the lapel. If they've got 1 badge, you might recognize it. It's a great conversation starter. Oh, I see you're a member of such and such a regiment, or such and such a charity. It's a great way to get a bit of networking going on without saying anything. You see the badge, you recognize the affiliation. However, if you've got 2 or 3, it's going to be distracting. And you know, people are going to stare at your lapel rather than speaking to you. So my observation there, limit it to 1 unless you've got a very good reason not to do so. Just my thoughts. So there we go. Those are the questions which I thought I'd share with you today. Now, if you've got a question for me, by all means, throw it in. I'd be more than happy to do a few extra of these videos from time to time. Leave the question in the comment section below, or you can send me an email. My email address is on the screen now, or you'll find it in the About section on the main YouTube page for this channel. But no, send it in, and I'm more than happy to answer if I can. And if I don't know the answer, I'll do a bit of research and I'll give you some, proper researched responses to your questions. So if you have enjoyed the video, give it a thumbs up. You'd like to see more? Click the old subscribe button. If you'd like to contribute to this conversation, leave it in the comment section below. You can support the channel by buying me a coffee, or you can join as a patron. My patrons get extra videos from me, and you will see their names at the end of this video too. So until the next time, wear your pocket squares, your ties, your shoes and your lapel badges with pride and passion. And I will see you again very soon.